Started it with the threes, ended it with the fours. I am back on the Talking TV podcast, joined once again by Luk of Luk Reviews. We are ending it talking about a movie that I feel like both of us have very much been looking forward to. This movie just fits perfectly right in our wheelhouse. John Wick, Chapter 4, as well as we will be giving a little preview about the debut of Succession Season 4, which premieres tonight. By the time this episode goes up on Spotify tomorrow, it will have already aired. I will have already put out a reaction to it as well. Two of our favorite things to talk about. I couldn't be more excited to have you on, Luke, and we'll all be covered on today's episode of the Talking TV podcast. What is going on, people? We are recording again in our normal Sunday morning slot. I am, of course, Dom the Movie Nerd, and I'm joined once again by Luk of Luk Reviews. And Luke, like this weekend is just, it's Christmas to us. It's Christmas 2.0. Like, we are just beyond excited. We get the return of our boy, John Wick. I've been waiting. I was doing the math there because John Wick famously, it's funny. I kept saying this over and over again over the last couple of years where I'm like, this is it. We've got it. All the movies that were delayed because of COVID. We got them all. And then I was like, shit, there's one more. Shit, there's a Batman. Oh, yeah, there's another Fast and Furious movie. And I now think that I can officially say that this one is the last of the movies that were delayed because of COVID. John Wick, Chapter 4, no subtitle this time, which was originally set to premiere in March of 2021, was delayed a year so that it wouldn't interfere with The Matrix, and then was delayed another year in order to not interfere with something else that was supposed to come out last year that I wasn't remembering right now, but it's back. And it's glorious, man. All the action, all the amazing stunt work that made Keanu Reeves and made this now franchise a staple. I mean, Luke, break it down for me. When was the first time that you watched John Wick and realized that it was going to be like one of your absolute favorite things ever?
You know, people keep asking, like you said, if the movies are back. And I haven't really had an answer. But yeah, I'm thinking the movies are back. And this month proved it very much so. No, with John Wick, I watched them all in 2019 and lead up to the third one. That was year one of Luk Reviews. I was discovering many new films, John Wick, one of them. And I thought they were really great. And I rewatched them this year. I think they're equally great. But this one takes it up a half star for me.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's this one takes it up a whole notch in length as well, you know, because people, again, they really knew what they had going for them because they clocked this one up to a whopping 3 hours long. I'm like, oh boy, when franchises are getting to that point, you know that they are rock solid in people's minds. Yeah, I remember, I still remember when the first one of these movies came out, because I think this is actually the first time we've ever covered a John Wick movie on the podcast. You know, we did, Chris and I did Nobody back in 2021, which was written by the same guy that wrote this movie, Derek, and kind of conceived of the whole idea for this franchise to begin with, Derek Kolstad, which famously starred Bob Odenkirk, and also was the thing that saved his life when he had his heart attack on the set of Better Call Saul. He even attributed it to that movie and because of how in shape he was. And I mean, just in terms of like being a complete visionary, like the idea that Derek Kolstad has this idea for this entire underground like assassin world that's like basically like the several like societies stacked upon societies of like underground Illuminati-esque figures that like only dwell within like the upper echelon, the high elite of New York, that have like this economic system that exists outside of the foundation of the current economic system, where they just have all the money and the resources of the world to fund these hordes of assassins. And what was interesting to me is it's like I remember back in 2013, Keanu Reeves was pretty much on the last legs of whatever was left of his career at that point. You know, he kind of the late 2000s and early 2010s were not kind to him career-wise. And I remember seeing the trailer for this movie called 47 Ronin, which I thought looked like the stupidest thing ever. And in hindsight, I realized it was kind of the precursor, because in a strange way, I feel like that's the movie that proved that Keanu could do this again, because next thing you know, you have Derek Kolstad writing this script. You have his former stuntman on The Matrix, Chad Stahelski, being tasked to direct this for Lionsgate. The first one's got a very, very low budget and could not have a more simpler premise, which is a bunch of guys kill this legendary hitman's dog without realizing who he is. Next thing you know, he's going to return to the world that he left behind in order to make this life with his now past wife. and just raise all hell, and which is going to kick off this series of events that is going to throw this entire underworld into disarray. And I mean, you couldn't have it's kind of the Breaking Bad premise where you're like you have just a premise that is almost impossible to fuck up. And that's exactly what they did. And I mean, and now with every subsequent sequel, it's like that. It's weird because it's like the stories, quote unquote, of these movies have arguably gotten worse and worse with each sequel. But like, because the action has been upped so crazily with each one, like it really doesn't even matter. And so I watched the first one, was blown away by it. I watched 2 in theaters. 3, I actually did not watch in theaters because I was actually recovering from a little stint that I had back in 2019 that I know I've talked about on this show before. And what's it called? And so I watched that online, but it was just as breathtaking. And again, like I'm always torn because I'm like, I am such a story fiend. So even when the story is clearly not supposed to be the focus, like I still can't help focusing, and my brain just can't help thinking about it. Where I'm like, there's so many things that are happening that don't make sense at all. But like the stunt work is just, it's so amazing. And like my appreciation for the choreography and the gun fu, as they've literally come to call it. That's what Stahelski and David Leitch, who co-directed the first one and has gone off to have an incredible career of his own, directing one of our favorite movies of last year, Bullet Train, to name a few, have come to call it. It's just, it truly has become a phenomenon, to say the least. So, I mean, I mean, you talked about watching it. Like, what is it about? I mean, you're an action fiend, but like, what is it about these movies that just make them just so special and so excellent and so iconic?
I think it's maybe just like how real the action feels. Like not Keanu does most of his stunts. I think that helps a lot, but it's all choreographed to perfection by probably like a team of 100 people. Like, but it never feels like you're watching the same action scene twice. They always throw something in there, even if it's like one extended action sequence. They move places, they use different guns, or they throw Donnie Yen in there, a blind guy, which adds a whole nother level of epicness. But yeah, like you said, the first movie is just like a simple premise. A guy kill his dog, he's out for revenge. And I was explaining to my friend, like, I told him, oh yeah, I saw John Wick this week. He's like, oh, what are they actually about? And like, when the first one, they kill his dog and he goes for revenge. The second one, he blow
up his house. And
he has to finish a debt. Third one, everyone wants to kill him. And the fourth one, he's fighting for his freedom, but everyone still wants to kill him. It's simple enough, but then every movie they deepen the lore even more, like add more, you learn more about the high table, the different continentals in each major city. It seems like I think my favorite stuff is in the first movie where he's like, I need a dinner reservation for 12 people or whatever it is, and it's just little things like that. And yeah, it's a great world. Everyone seems to be either an assassin or dancing in a nightclub.
Pretty much.
I think that's the only choice of character you have in these. And yeah, the story isn't as important if the action is flowing it forward. I think the third one maybe got a little too deep into the world without being as interesting, but like the first 40 minutes of that movie is some of the best stuff in any action movie ever.
Absolutely.
But this one just turned the action up. The runtime is absolutely justified. There's so many scenes. It doesn't feel like 3 hours to me, personally, but yeah, it's just.
I'll get into my thoughts on the runtime just in general, but yeah, like it's like you said, it's such for lack of a better word, old school storytelling and filmmaking, where again, just keep it simple. It's something that just so many just modern filmmakers in Hollywood just have seemed to have lost the ability to do, which is just to keep it simple. As long as your premise is simple and relatable, the audience will go along with it. And you could throw as much world building and myth making and crazy stuff. And like I said, just the construction and the thought that is put into, again, it's like these idiot executives over at Disney and Warner that are trying to shove countless amounts of superhero content down our throats without actually understanding why everybody is losing interest and nobody cares. Could honestly take a note from this franchise book, because the whole thing is that at the end of the day, you could always relate to Wick as ridiculous and over the top and crazy and slightly nonsensical the action gets. It's like, it's the reason why people love action movies, and it's the reason why people will keep coming back to watch them, because it's as cool as the Continental stuff is. That's all gravy, you know. And honestly, I think that the whole idea of doing spin-offs, and I know they had that they've been working on a TV show version of the Continental. I think that's cool, but like you're never gonna capture the magic, because at the end of the day, you know, people can say it's Keanu, and yeah, Keanu's relatable, but no, it's Wick, and it's the fact that it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, he's a dude who's lost everything and is just trying to, you know, enjoy his retired life, and just this world, for whatever reason, just will not let him. So, and as these movies constantly prove time and time again, this is what happens when you poke the sleeping bear. It will bite back, and it will come for everything that you have and your mother. And it just, oh man, like, so you have one, and that's, like I said, that's your introduction to the world, right? That's setting you up and everything. Two, you further deepen it. You know, that's when you get into like the idea of like, okay, there's other Continentals out there. There's other like, you know, they get into the whole idea of like the debts with the coins and everything.
I guess they didn't know that they were gonna have such a successful first movie, so they kind of,
right, that's what always happens.
They didn't
right?
prepare for that.
But
so.
but again, like it wasn't necessary, because you always see this. You always see this time and time again, where again, the mistake that everybody is making now is everybody is making things that are setting up for franchise, and half the time that results in like these half
Army of the Dead.
Thank you. That results in these half-baked
Rebel Moon in a few months.
Oh man,
I don't know why they're both Zack Snyder, but
I was about to say, I'm like, is there a Snyder theme going on there? Yeah, it's like I said, it's, you have all of these franchises that are just like setting up that have these movies that are like designed to be like TV shows, but like the problem there is that like we don't get one satisfying overall one viewing experience. And so whenever somebody says it's like, yeah, they weren't expecting for it to be as successful as it is, that's a good thing, you know. First of all, to temper expectations, because in this business and this industry, you never know what's going to hit. And also, when it does hit and is as big as it is, it's a surprise usually, but in a good way, because as long as you have the creative team that knows what they're doing, which this is one that definitely knows what they're doing, you will continue to have good products, and you will continue to have great entertaining experiences overall. It's like, this is just the stuff that it's like, I wish that Hollywood would just learn to understand, you know. And it's like, and like, if you're just talking about the creative team as well, I think the thing also that separates this from something like a Mission Impossible, which is like, or like pretty much any one of the action franchises that Tom Cruise does, is that like, these are people who got their start in indie film, you know, like Stahelski and David Leitch, who both worked for years as Keanu stuntmen, and so they learned to understand the business. And you have the cinematographer for all these movies is Dan Lausen, who shot a lot of Guillermo del Toro's movies. He shot the last couple. You have Derek Kolstad, the screenwriter, who basically got his start in like super tiny indies before before getting John Wick. You have all of these people who ultimately have been around the industry for years, have understood it, have learned to understand what works and what doesn't. And so and also, like I said, working within limited budgets, which is also a tremendous help as well. You know, keeping it practical, not having this heavy reliance on CG, you know, understanding the idea that what interests people about these come from story, not from spectacle. Ultimately, the spectacle is second, and that's what makes it so satisfying when we get it. And then, like I said, they just ultimately get bigger and bigger and bigger with each movie, but they never lose sight or lose focus. So that's us kind of talking about the franchise in general. Let's talk about this movie itself. So like you said, so after the events of the last one, John was ultimately betrayed by Winston in order to potentially get his seat back at the high table. That is shown to ultimately not really have worked, as we are introduced to the latest in a line of, you know, villain figures, the Marquis de Cremont, played by Bill Skarsgard, who once again places a giant hit out on Wick once again, as Wick is intent on like I said, on taking his revenge on the high table for betraying him, but once again is offered a chance to earn his freedom back, but not before ultimately the Marquis commissions an old friend of his from his past, portrayed by Donnie Yen, to help take him out. And like I said, it just leads to, like I said, even more set pieces, even more shenanigans, even more crazy stunts. There's literally a point, an action set piece sequence involving a staircase that is simultaneously one of the greatest and most hilarious things I've ever seen, because it's just like they absolutely know what they're doing in terms of just constantly knocking him down and him getting back up again. And like they're literally playing around with the audience where we're like, okay, we know that you know that this is ridiculous, that Wick should be dead by this point with the amount of bullets that he's taken. I think there's even a point like when they get to the duel at the end when he's taking off all of his clothes and you can just hear all the bullets just ricocheting off and rolling off and hitting the ground. It's great stuff. It's great. So Luke, your general thoughts on this one overall?
The first thing I wrote in my review was stairs. Lots of
So many
stairs.
stairs.
That was sensational. It reminded me of Kung Fu Panda, if anything. And, Winston Duke. No, not Winston Duke. Ian McShane,
Ian McShane.
Is in both of these.
Yes. Ian McShane
yeah.
and stairs. I was not expecting those two, that comparison, but I love it.
Yeah, I just had an amazing time. Action delivered, like everyone was hyping it up. I thought, is it really that good? But it's John Wick. It has to be that good.
Has to be. It has to be.
The movies
it's never
are back.
Not been.
John Wick is back, and it delivered. Like I said, it's my favorite of the franchise. It's my favorite of the year so far. And like I mentioned before we started, all my favorites of the year are sequels, but they're alarmingly high numbers of sequels. I have John Wick 4, Rocky 9, and the Scream 6.
Yeah.
So, and every year it's going to get higher. Like, I just look at the upcoming years. Like, oh,
yeah,
it's
not even just that they're sequels. It's that they're like a ridiculous amount of sequels, like 4, like 9. Like we have 9 Rocky movies now. 9. I know the Creed movies are technically like their own thing, but like, come on, you know.
But they're very good, and the franchise that has the 4th movie as their best one is a good sign. If it is their last, I'll be absolutely fine with that.
Right.
I know there was a plan for a 5th, but I don't know how they're gonna do that.
Well, we'll get to that when we cover the big spoiler at the end, which I don't think anybody saw coming. And like I said, it's once again a tribute to them, that the fact that they can pull off something like that in the age of the internet and surprisingly not have it spoiled, which I'm actually like really happy about. My big thing going into this movie and kind of the theme overall of this movie that I don't necessarily know if this sets this above the sequels. I'm still trying to figure out like where I would rank each of the sequels. 1 is still definitively the best, but I got to look back and figure out like which one I like more, because 2. The thing about 2 is 2 has, I think, the least successful story, but the action of that movie at the time when I watched it at theaters was just like that. That had been unlike anything that I had ever seen before. When you just have the sequence that I always come back to is the sequence between him and Common, where they're shooting at each other back and forth in like this crowded hallway with the silencers and nobody knows what's going on. I'm like, this is absolutely insane. But the thing that I appreciated about this one is this one was really dealing with mortality and finality, and kind of I feel like really bringing it back to exactly, focusing it on what John's mission was, because I feel like you have Ian McShane as his character that in a weird way, like even though he always has an agenda and he's always like for himself, has always kind of like been in John's corner and like has had this like old friendship with John. That's kind of been established since the first one, and that kind of ties into Ian McShane's career in general as being this legacy character actor that is just so well known. Like you always recognize his voice, but you never really like know who he is, and this is like what really turns him into Ian McShane, the superstar. And kind of, reminding John, it's like, you can kill and drop as many bodies as you possibly want, but like at the end of the day, you got to remember what you're doing this for. Remember, you got out once, you can do it again, and there's always kind of this reminder, and like you see it on Keanu's face, and I feel like it ties into Keanu as well, where again, it just ties into this idea of the aging movie star and the fact that like we don't really have movie stars anymore, and all of our movie stars that we have left are getting old. I was literally talking about this with my friend the other day. I'm like, all of these movie stars that have been such a big part of our lives for generations, like Tom Cruise is 61. Is 61 this year. Brad Pitt is 60. Keanu Reeves is 60 next year. Downey Jr., 2 more years, is 60. These guys are getting old. And like the fact that they are still doing, like they're not playing aging parts, they're still playing some iteration of characters they've been playing. Tom Cruise has been playing Ethan Hunt for 30 years now. Keanu Reeves has been playing John Wick for almost 10 years now, and only 2 years ago returned to play Neo, a character that he hadn't played in almost 20 years at that point. Like these guys have been around forever, and I like the idea that this movie is finally starting to address the idea of mortality, address the idea of like legacy and what it is that you're doing it for, because he starts this movie once again just yet on another quest for revenge, which seemingly has driven the last couple. It's always been about revenge. First it's his dog, then it's his house, then it's just the entire world is coming after him and it's just a matter of survival. Now it's the fact that again that the world that he entrusted originally has seemingly screwed him over again. And the movie, again, with Ian McShane and Laurence Fishburne and all these other guys and all these other legacy figures that are there, they're all kind of there to remind him, it's like, yeah, you can keep being top dog, but at the end of the day, you got to have a reason to do it, And I really like that. I like that there was kind of like that underlying thread. And I think it ties into probably, and fuck it, I'm just going to spoil it now. I think that's why the decision to kill him at the end was great. And like, honestly, a really, really touching heartfelt, like really nice little bow tie on this. I talk all the time, the idea of like, the idea of the perfect trilogy, the idea about how each one of those, kind of fits into the perfect 3-act structure. And while 3, I kind of scratched my head and questioned, like, are they sure they want to do another one after this? Like, can they just be done? And after watching
it felt
this,
like that if they continue doing that one, it could be stretched out and not feel as
and
poignant.
not feel as special and not feel as poignant. And so but little did I know, again, it was all setting up for this one, and that whether they intended for this to be the last one when they were writing 3 and when they were going to this one, I don't know. But whatever the case is, it was the right call. And like I said, I thought it was, like I said, it was a perfect bow tie on a really, really well done franchise and a really well done 21st century action icon. I don't know. What do you think? I feel like as we're talking about this, I'm reminding once again of what happened 2 years ago in No Time to Die, when they made the decision to kill off Daniel Craig's Bond, the first time that we'd ever seen any iteration of Bond killed off on screen. And even though we know there will be future iterations of Bond, like, I don't know. What do you think about the decision to kill Wick at the end of this one?
I like how you mentioned the Bond comparison, because I think Daniel Craig's always stood out to me as the one that has actual character to him. The other ones maybe Lazenby a little bit, but that's only one movie. The rest of them are just like a template. So it felt right to kill off Craig's version with Wick. I thought it was also a very bold but a very good decision, because I thought he's earned his freedom and now he can join his wife. Or whatever. A little bit corny, but maybe a little bit corny is what you need. In the John Wick.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chris and I talk all the time about like what is quote unquote like acceptable corny versus what isn't. And the thing that I always come to, I'm like, it works if it works for the story, if it works with the character, And again, as stiff as Keanu is in these movies, and as much as we can make fun of the one-liners, which it's like Keanu. But it's Keanu. So like you can't be mad at this point. It's funny. Like I remember having this conversation all the time with my friends in the Gap back during the pandemic. We're like, Keanu Reeves can't act for shit, but he's such a great guy. We can't help but love him. Again, this is no secret. All the behind the scenes stories about just like what a great guy he is and how giving and how caring and just generous of a person he is and all that. It shines through in his performances. And even though, like I said, he's not the best actor, quote unquote. He's worked with he's had the great fortune in Hollywood of working with people who understand how to use him, which is very, very rare. And like I said, and the fact that it's allowed for him to have this long gestating career over the last 4 decades that he has been a part of our lives. Like I said, he really came to prominence in the 90s with action movies like Speed and The Matrix. He was just so endearing. And then the early 2000s, with The Matrix. And then that kind of went, kind of petered. I feel like Constantine was kind of like the last high point, and it kind of petered off in like the late 2000s and early 2010s with some kind of just bad hits. But John Wick brought him right back. And like I said, he's become like another permanent staple of the pop culture lexicon, with his little cameos and different things like Toy Story 4 and Always Be My Maybe and what's it called? And all the video games. I know like he was pretty much like a major selling point of that Cyberpunk game that I know kind of fell apart afterwards. But yeah, it's just people love Keanu just in general as an icon. They love him. They really enjoy him. They love how generous of a person he is. And like I said, it shines through. And I just love the juxtaposition of such this kind, generous, like really caring person playing this ultimate just killing machine. Like that, I've lost track at this point of the amount of bodies that John has dropped. But again, like it shows in the character where it works because the character of Wick is ultimately a gentle person. You can ultimately tell that this is a person who has probably never, again, like you really, you never really know much about Wick. Like you're told about him, but it's almost like a Joker thing where it's like you never know what could be true and what could not be, and like you always get the sense that he is this person who has never really had much of a choice in his life, ultimately in the choices and the directions where he was pushed in his life. And so the fact that you get what's it called? The fact that, like I said, you have this brilliant juxtaposition of this really like seemingly gentle soul who just wants nothing but a peaceful, quiet life mixed with just the most lethal killer on the planet, I think provides just the perfect juxtaposition that you need for this franchise and for that character, and ultimately allows you to root for him because as this world just throws like more and more actual monsters at him, it works. It always allows you to root for him as well. And I think that's what makes this one even more interesting because I think this is the first one where other than, Wick and his allies on one side, all the bad guys on the other side, you have for the first time in a while, like other characters who are a little bit more morally gray, like the Donnie Yen character, like the Shamir Anderson character, the nobody character, who again is introduced as somebody who's only being in there for the money, but you can tell is kind of like a representation of, like, for lack of a better word, the working class assassin, where he's just in it for the money. He doesn't care about who his targets are, but at the same time, he does kind of like have this moral foundry, you know, and I like the juxtaposition against like kind of, you know, the whole hoity-toity Illuminati-esque, you know, very old money, pretentious character of the Marquis with the Bill Skarsgard character. You know, it's so well done. Like I said, these writers, these crafters, they know exactly what they are doing. They know exactly what kind of how to present everything, you know. And again, I love the little celebrity inserts that they put into each one of these movies. You know, obviously, like I said, the first one, you had Ian McShane and Lance Reddick, who have now become staples of this franchise. Rest in peace also to Lance Reddick as well. Talk about something that nobody saw coming at all. You know, he'd already been in like 3 or 4 things that I'd seen just this year. Like, just a death that just came as an absolute shock to all of us, you know. And the first one had, you know, like staples, you know, it had like John Leguizamo, and it had Alfie Allen, fresh, you know, who is right in the middle of Game of Thrones as the villain, and it had Michael Nyqvist, again, legacy in the Norwegian crime circuit, and Adrian Palicki and Dave Patrick Kelly, and all of these, like I said, these action icons. And then 2, you bring in Common. And then 3, you bring in the the Raid guys, and you bring in Asia Kate Dillon from Billions. And there's and I'm almost forgetting, and they also bring back Laurence Fishburne, and so you have a little like Matrix reunion, and Fishburne is just there to chew scenery like it's a piece of meat. Like I said, I know I've
never seen a man have more fun with a role.
Seriously,
than
like every minute that he's on screen, I'm just like, this is why. I'm like, this is why Fishburne is one of the greats. Tarantino called Fishburne the greatest actor of his generation, and I fully and wholeheartedly agree. Like, it's just, he's just having so much fun. And this one, like I said, I mean, the celebrities that they bring in for this one, like I said, like Donnie Yen, Scott Adkins, Hiroyuki Sanada, Clancy Brown, like the list just keeps going on and on and on. So like, but here's the thing though, I think I screwed up because I thought that Scott Adkins played Bill Skarsgard's right-hand man, and I was very wrong, because he plays that weird like German guy with the fat suit and the golden teeth, who like is almost in competition with Wick to see like how long he can last, how many hits he can take, how many elevated platforms he can drop off before he finally dies, with the most ridiculous over-the-top accent, and he's always laughing. Like, I didn't even realize that was Scott Adkins underneath that. It was kind of insane just in general. What are your thoughts on like all of like the different celebrities that they put into these movies over the course of the last 9 years of these movies?
Yeah, I think it just goes to show how much the franchise has grown in popularity, how many people love it. They can get like a Halle Berry to show up with her 2 dogs. They can get Braun from Game of Thrones as well to bite his finger off or whatever happened to him with the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one had the most supporting characters, I guess, and they were all just fantastic. Like you said, the Scott Adkins character. I don't know who Scott Adkins is, but I know he doesn't look like
Scott
that.
Adkins is a very, very well-known figure in what I like to call the underground martial arts movie movement. But as far as his mainstream appearances go, he famously did the stunt work for his big claim to mainstream fame came in when he did the stunt work for unfortunately the Deadpool stand-in at the end of the much maligned X-Men Origins Wolverine. That was him doing the stunt work. He also was Jean-Claude Van Damme's number 2 in Expendables 2 as well, and also was one of the many sidekicks to Matt Mickelson's character in Doctor Strange. But the biggest thing is that a lot of people have been silently campaigning and petitioning for him to take over the part of either of a superhero, either a Wolverine or a Batman. But for me, I'm like, it's mostly just because of the physicality, and I get it why. But I think this was the first instance where I actually saw, I'm like, oh no, he can actually act.
Yeah, and that poker scene, I almost wanted to like give them a round of applause for the poker scene, because they didn't give the protagonist the best cards, but they still gave a guy a royal flush. I was like, nope, you're not off the hook completely.
Yep, not completely.
And then other supporting characters, I forget his name, but he was also in Bullet Train.
Hiroyuki Sanada, absolutely. I almost forgot about him. But like the minute that they introduced him, I'm like, there's no way in hell that we don't get a fight between him and Donnie Yen, because every time Hiroyuki Sanada is in something, he always has to pull out that samurai sword, and he always has to fight someone with it, and it's fucking awesome. I think that's one of the main reasons why the last season of Lost was not good, because you had Hiroyuki Sanada in there, and he didn't get to use that damn sword at all. And I'm like, that is a crime against humanity. And even though the fight was short and brief. It was a little bit more like Obi-Wan versus Maul. That fight between him and Donnie Yen was just, it was perfect. It was everything I could have asked for and more.
You even had the minor characters like Mr. Nobody, who was a cool presence in the film. And of course, you have a John Wick movie, you have to have a dog. Very, very cool dog. And what's her name? Rina Sawayama, I believe.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
As Sanada's daughter, cool. Natalia Tena, Osha from Game of Thrones was in there. Like this one had a lot. It had a lot. It was great.
Donnie Yen was definitely my favorite part.
Absolutely.
I was like, I wouldn't mind seeing a spin-off movie about him. And sure enough, the post-credit scene arrived. And
and that's like, yep. Like, I wouldn't mind
sign me up.
And also they've already announced the spin-off as well, the Ana de Armas spin-off, Ballerina as well. Based off of the Roscova moment from the last one. Angelica Houston also was a stand-in as a celebrity stand-in for that one. I wanted to point out two things that this movie kind of pulled and poked fun of from other franchises. This is the second Mr. Nobody in an action franchise after Kurt Russell's Mr. Nobody in the Fast and Furious movies. And this is the second time, at least in American cinema, that I've seen Donnie Yen play blind after his appearance in Rogue One. And I
did catch that as well.
There were two little fun tidbits, and I'm like, yeah, these guys, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And like, it's great. It's so awesome.
We're going to talk about it a bit later, but Donnie Yen is now my favorite. Fuck off, Sayer.
Oh man, we're gonna talk about that. I mean, talk about when I heard that, I'm like, this is why Donnie Yen is the greatest. And I mean, even I gotta give a shout out to Bill Skarsgard. He played a great bad guy. He's just, again, so pretentious. He's the guy that the minute that he comes on screen, you're like, I can't wait to see Wick kill this guy, and I can't wait to see how he kills him. And just the way that he did it, it was freaking great. It was awesome. I think that is one of the best last minute reveal kill scenes where they're doing the duel, and he's like, you idiot. He's like, and the fact that it came from Ian McShane, he's like, he didn't shoot, and by the time he realized it, he pulls out the gun and kills. He's like, consequences, bam, and I'm like, yeah. It's just that I got
a cheer as well.
That's gonna go down in history as one of the greatest action one-liners, at least one of my favorites. Which is, along with diplomatic immunity has just been revoked, and and let that be a lesson to your witch ass. Just again, we need more action one-liners back. We need them back. Marvel kind of took that away from us for a while, but we're getting them back slowly. So let's hope that we can bring them back completely.
Well, that just happened.
Yes, it did. It's like, well, that just happened. Oh man, but yeah, so now that John Wick is over, I mean, like I said, they've said that they are open to the idea of spin-offs and sequels. Obviously with Donnie Yen and the Rina Sawayama character, they've announced the Ballerina spin-off with Ana de Armas. But honestly, I mean, I don't know. I'm always skeptical about spin-offs just in general. My whole thing is, it's like, as long as it's the same creative team, I'm okay with it. But I don't know if it will be, especially because Chad Stahelski has greatly expressed interest in and once he was done with Wick, in adapting a Ghosts of I believe, I can't remember what the name of that video game is, but it's a Ghost of Tsushima video game. He's been very adamant about adapting that as well. And like I said, I mean, these guys, they've been doing Wick for Stahelski specifically. I know David Leitch moved on and has been doing his own thing since, and for the most part has had a lot of success with that, doing a lot of these really big, interesting franchise movies. But Stahelski in general, I feel like this kind of all comes down to him. So like, what do you think? What's it called? What do you want to see next from these guys just in general? Do you think are you interested in more John Wick spinoffs? Do you think they should continue with these in general, or leave well enough alone?
I think they should at least give it a go. Like one or two. They're gonna have the Continental. They're gonna have Ballerina, which Ana de Armas is enough of a pull for people to go out and see.
Yeah, and at the very least, say what you will about her acting, but at the very least, she proved in No Time to Die that she's got the action chops as well.
Yeah, I think that was a bit of a teaser of what we might get, but I think Wick's going to be a bit more brutal. It does have that R rating. If we do get that Donnie Yen versus Rina Sawayama movie, I'm there day one.
Absolutely.
I just don't know how good it's going to be without Stahelski as the main guy. Of course, he's going to be executive producer on all of these, but having someone else there, how much will that affect it? As for Stahelski himself, I think I'm always excited to see what directors do when they leave a franchise or go out and try something new. Like when James Gunn, he went from Marvel to DC. I was very excited to see what he does with that. And look where that got him.
Look where that went. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
James Gunn tweeting like some bad jokes like 10 years ago leads to him being the head of DC.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, again, talk about failing upwards for sure.
But yeah, I'm excited to see what Stahelski does with Ghost of Tsushima. I haven't played it, but I've seen glimpses of it. It's a very cinematic game, and John Wick always looks very cinematic, very neon colors. And I think he's gonna if he gets that cinematographer to work with him or whatever, I think it's gonna look great. See what he can do with like a full samurai setting, like John Wick has. So samurai, like, I don't know, hints, but I just hope they let him do what he wants and make it his own, but not so much that it's just John Wick with the samurai.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So with that being said, before we move on to Succession, like I said, final thoughts and star ratings. And then, like I said, so of all the action set pieces that we have in this movie, which let's count it down. So we have the opening scene with the desert. We have got the, what's it called? We've got the entire Japan sequence at the Osaka Continental and everything there. We've got the, what's it called? We've got the German club sequence. We have the attempts to, we have the entire Paris attack sequence and the attempt to get up the stairs. And then we have the final duel. Of those 5, what is your number 1 of the movie?
I think we can maybe even differentiate like some of the Paris segments because it goes on for so long.
The Paris segment, that was definitely the moment where you mentioned above that it went smoothly by. I am inclined to agree for the most part, but that Paris segment specifically, that definitely stretched a lot.
But it did have that really cool moment where the camera goes above his
when
head.
the camera is going above and it's going above all the different stats. And that was badass. That was all. I think that would have to be it for me. Absolutely, because I'm just looking at that cinematography. I'm just looking at that. I'm like, how the fuck do these guys top it every single time? I'm like, I need to know how they pull that off camera-wise. That is nuts.
But for me, it has to be the stairs. Like when he started rolling down, my theater
and
was
he does the whole
exploding.
Stunt, and it's the one take, and he goes down how many of those stairs? Like I lost track. I'm like, what is that? Like 8 flights of stairs, something like that.
But then my entire theater was absolutely laughing at
my entire theater.
Like
lost
John Wick's been getting beat up the whole movie. He jumped out of a window like 3 minutes ago, landed on the van. Did he know the van was there?
Who knows? And he landed on it head first. It's not even like he's fucking. It's not even. I'm like, there was a point where I'm like, this is almost getting to Fast and Furious levels, where I'm like, he literally fell off 4 stories and landed head first on the van and just gets up and walks away. I'm like, he's literally superhuman. Like, this is insane.
But yeah, it's the stairs for me.
Yeah, it's got to be. So yeah, then your final thoughts and star ratings on John Wick, Chapter 4.
Final thoughts. My favorite of the year. I think it will remain in my. I'm going to be optimistic and say top 5 of the year. I think Oppenheimer, Mission Impossible, and Dune are gonna. And Spider-Verse probably.
And Spider-Verse,
those, and Indy 5 probably not, but I think it'd be good. I think if it remains in the top 5, I'll be very happy. 4.5 stars for me. Not quite a 5, but yeah. The first 3 are low 4s for me, so I think that this is like a mid 4.5 for me. I think that's a really good improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, it's a 4. It's a solid 4. Like I said, these movies, like I said, none of them really have none of these sequels really have yet to top the first one, which still, like I said, has the best and most compelling story. But as far as just being like a perfect send-off and like just for a potential final entry, just going all out, like absolutely kudos, props off. Like I said, just from a craft standpoint, these movies do it unlike any other. So my hat always goes off to it. So now let's go to another thing that you watched recently. That again, Dustin the Duster Mason twice. Wow, that's amazing. Dustin the Duster Mason and I recapped every episode of Succession's 3rd season, with that was airing back in the fall of 2021, and now it is back. And for the 4th and final time, we're here to talk and give a little preview about Succession season 4. Also the first time that we've done a full podcast episode on this show. And I mean, like, we've talked about this with Barry. Like I said, it really, when these 2 shows premiered back in 2018, I came to Succession a little bit later. Barry, I was into like immediately right off the bat, but Succession.
I'm enjoying Barry. It's
so good, right? It's so good. But Succession was a show that I was into like right off the bat, right off the cusp, Succession was one I came to a little bit later because I remember seeing the production names. I remember watching the trailer, and I'm like, I wasn't exactly sure if this was going to be something that interested me, but it took Dustin pushing me to watch it, and I finally watched it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is great. This is one of the best shows ever. It's just, again, Jesse Armstrong, who comes from the Armando Iannucci train of British writing, and he came over to America and pitched the show right off of Veep and was like, yeah, what if we basically took a British look, a British satirical look, essentially at satirizing an American corporation family, specifically with his take down of the Murdochs, and also, model it around kind of this, this Game of Thrones as structure of all of these dipshit kids battling it out for their aging legacy father's throne. Only their father is possibly one of the most evil people on the planet in the form of the Roys. And like I said, we were waiting with bated breath throughout the pandemic for it to come back after that gangbusters of a season 2 finale, and then it came back for 9 episodes of just absolute gloriousness. I know a couple people were like criticizing the 3rd season. I'm like, you people are morons. Like, you don't understand just like the grand overall set piece. And after another gangbusters finale that really came out of nowhere with Logan's decision to sell the company to Mattson, Alexander Skarsgård's character, and box out his children out of their fortune. It was setting up for always going to be a 4th season, but the question was always going to be whether or not this was going to be the last season or the penultimate season. And so I was hoping that we were going to get one more season after this one, but unfortunately it proved to be true. Jesse Armstrong announced just a few weeks before the season 4 premiere that this would indeed be the last season. So Luke, we haven't actually gotten a chance to talk a whole lot about this show, just in general, what your thoughts are. So run down your thoughts on Succession as you're watching it, and then let me know what your thoughts were when you found out that this was going to be the last season.
I was definitely late to the party on this one. I watched it sometime in like the summer last year, I want to say, or the autumn or something. By then, all 3 seasons were out, and it's just like, wow, this is just amazing. It's funny. It's amazingly well written. There's despicable characters. What's not to love? And it quickly became one of my favorite shows. And then they announced that season 4 was coming in March. So I was like, oh, gotta rewatch it because might as well, right?
Yep.
And then I did, and I appreciate it even more, especially season 2, because I was able to follow everything a little better. But then when the final season was announced, I remember it was like a few days ago. Jeremy Strong. Jeremy Strong,
yeah.
He gave like an interview with someone. He said there was some implication that it might be the last season. It's like, okay, whatever, we'll brush it off. And I woke up one day and Twitter had exploded with reactions and gifs of sadness. Like, oh no, it is the last one. But I thought, well, if this is the last one, then they've made a bold decision to go out on a high before it has a chance to stagnate. And it's on
Jesse Armstrong.
Jesse's Armstrong's.
Oh, that's all right. You got the last name mixed up. It doesn't have Strong and Armstrong. It is very confusing.
And they both begin with J.
It doesn't help at all. Yeah.
So he ended it on his terms, clearly, and apparently he didn't himself know that it was going to be the last season when they were doing it.
It was something that he was grappling with for a while, for sure, especially after season 3 and the direction that they took that in. It was definitely something where he was like, do I want to do one more season? And he even talked about it in interviews. He was even like, yeah, there is a version where, again, I could just do like 10 straight seasons of The Roys, and it would probably be great every time. But would that be the best? Again, it's like what we were talking about. It is what's best for the story. And in this case, like I said, we always talk about in TV with the characters. I was talking about this with Yolo a little bit last week when we were talking about Ted Lasso and how this season, they haven't officially said it, but this season we can pretty much tell that this is the last season as well. And so again, I was talking about how, again, you have these 3 gigantic staples of TV that we've had for the last couple of years: Succession, Ted Lasso, and Barry, all airing their final seasons all around the same time, and kind of like
they all end with like 5 days
within a week of each other,
right before the Emmy window.
Exactly, like they knew exactly what they were doing there, like as far as airing those shows. Like and so the point that I made last week is that we were living through a moment right now. We're living through a very, very specific moment that we should be savoring every single minute of, because we are not going to see a moment like this again for a very, very long time. Because like I said, after this, it's pretty much just, like I said, how the franchises have infected TV now, with spinoffs and stuff. We'll still get good originals, but as far as like I said, us having like a big moment show like Succession, and the fact that it was kind of able to come in and like scoop up like the last remnants of the Game of Thrones sphere, and like I said, how it has been able to capture the pop culture status, and you know, like I said, with its very, very specific tone of being bitingly satirical and hilarious 1 minute and being just beyond dark and messed up and twisted, Shakespearean, draconian Shakespearean storytelling in the next. You know, again, it's one of the best ensemble casts that TV has assembled in the last couple of years. Like I said, assembling a group of character actors that have been working consistently for the last couple of years. You know, McFadden from Pride and Prejudice and Nicholas Braun, who've been in countless different movies from our youth. You know, I always think back that he's Zack Attack in Sky High. You know, Sarah Snook, who'd been acting in Australian TV. Kieran Culkin, you know, with the Culkin legacy around him. Jeremy Strong, who had just started popping up in all of these recent things. Alan Ruck, Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, all anchored by this one supreme force who had been in all of it. This legacy figure had been acting forever and had finally gotten a superstar role with Brian Cox kind of leading them off, and they all work so well together and complement each other so well. And like I said, Talk could not be a more relevant show in terms of just giving the audiences like a basically to root for, as far as like, okay, who's going to ultimately overtake Logan? You know, will Logan ultimately be cowed? You know, while also providing the commentary on, you know, kind of the, you know, how lofty and out of touch and just ultimately, you know, narcissistic just the rich are, and ultimately how all of their illusions and grand gestures about wanting to help people out are ultimately meaningless, and how they really are only out for themselves. I think the like I said, the most tricky thing that this show had to overcome was ultimately straddling the line between not turning into another repetitive comedy ultimately, because that was one criticism that they get, was it's like, oh my God, is anybody ever going to beat Logan? We're just going to see Kendall try and fall flat on his face over and over and over again. But I think that how the show has branched out with all of its different characters, and kind of how you've seen the cyclical effect of how you saw that happen with Kendall, then with Shiv, and now you're starting to see it happen with Roman, specifically with the last season, of where it's like they get, you know, they try to get close, they fly too close to the sun, they start to get their parents' approval, then Logan knocks him down ultimately. You know, you also
Roman sends a dick pic to his own dad.
Exactly, Roman sends a dick pic to his dad, which I don't even know how that's possible, because you know, I don't even know how Logan and how Dad and Jerry in your phone are similar. So that was like,
now what happened was he was sending it to Jerry. The notification came up.
Okay.
He pressed it and he pressed send.
Oh,
and I guess
okay.
the image transferred to that conversation.
Got it. All right.
I don't have an iPhone, so I don't know if that works.
Okay.
But...
Okay. No, that explains, though. I don't have an iPhone either, so but that does make sense though ultimately, because I was always wondering. I'm like, because I knew that was the only moment where I'm like, I knew exactly what was going to happen in that moment, and I'm like, okay, like, well, really, we're doing this, like, because again, as much as I love the show, there are always those moments where I'm like, okay, really, we're gonna resort to this, like something like kind of small and cheap like that, but it always manages to top itself in the next one. Like I said, the brilliance with Shiv and Tom, and ultimately Shiv finally being honest to Tom for the first time ever, and it was only because her mom made her mad ultimately, and just all the ridiculousness that always goes on with Greg. I think the genius that they pulled off with cousin Greg is the fact that they posit him as the family doofus, but he's the only one with any morals, and he's the only one that actually like is always speaking common sense. And I always kind of take that for granted, but when you actually listen to what he's saying, you're like, no, this kid actually knows what he's talking about, and he actually is like the only one with any common sense. And like his and Tom's dynamics and back and forth are, again, become a fan favorite and a highlight of the show. So I want you to pick for me, before we wrap it up and get out of here, your favorite character, your favorite moment from the show, and a theory as to what's going to happen going into this final season.
My favorite character is Tom. I think I share that with a lot of people. Greg's number 2. My favorite Greg quote is, if it is to be said, so it is.
So it is.
I always said about Greg. He's in the wrong place at the right time.
Yes, exactly.
But my favorite moment. Come, piggies! Eat your sausages, piggies.
More on the floor.
More on the
floor.
More on the
floor. And of course.
And
I remember seeing that and being like, what the fuck is this? And please do not let it stop. I need this to go on for as long as humanly possible. And it did. It went on for like what felt like 20 minutes. It was great.
I would say that, and also the shareholders meeting in season 3 where Logan has a UTI. And he's like imagining dead cats under his chair.
Oh my God. It's so great.
And a theory for season 4, I think Roman's gonna get it.
You think Roman's gonna get it?
Yeah. But my mom thinks Logan's gonna keep it in
You
the
think
end,
Logan's
and nothing's gonna
Logan's
happen.
keep it, and then nothing's gonna
That's
happen.
what my mom
And
thinks.
it's just gonna end with
Yeah.
Well, the only reason why, like I said, is because like they can't end it on that note, because they can't just have it like everything stays the same. Like they gotta have like a little something extra as well, you know, where
But
it's
I
like,
think Roman gets it.
yeah, where like, you know, ultimately like what like Waystar ends up like getting completely bought out. You know, they end up like defeating Matson, but then there's one ultimately. My prediction is that Logan's gonna die. My prediction is that is what will happen. Logan is finally gonna die, and I think that I think that Tom ultimately is gonna get screwed over, unfortunately, which sucks because last season was such like a steady progressive build to Tom finally having this awesome apex moment, and it sucks because like I said, Tom is one of the best characters on the show, and it's funny because I remember when I made initially back in 2021 my top 10 favorite Succession characters, I initially put Kendall as the number one best character on the show, and I still stand by that statement. But I think that my favorite has got to be Roman, because just like there's no character who I've had a harder turnaround on, where there is no character who, again, just every single line that he just throws off the cuff, it always completely hits, and you know, which also ties into Roman's history, you know, Culkin's history as a child actor, and also where I've never had a character that I hated more that then turned into somebody who I just could not help but feeling bad for. Where, again, just all of the youngest sibling dynamics, where he's always acting out, always trying to get daddy's approval, because he ultimately is just like really psychologically scarred ultimately, because he just got really apparently brutalized if half the stuff that he said about his childhood is true, you know? So yeah, it's Roman, it's Kieran Culkin. You know, McFadden absolutely deserved the Emmy last year, and I'm glad that he won it, but I'm really rooting for Culkin to get it this year. I really am, above all else. So yeah, so that's it. That is our recap.
Let me ask you actually some things about season 4.
Yes.
Based on the trailers, what are some moments that you are looking forward to?
Connor's wedding, definitely, because his and Willa's wedding is happening this season, and they're doing it early too. It's only going to be episode 3, and I'm looking forward to just whatever ridiculous encounters happen between him and the Justin Kirk character. I'm looking forward to seeing just what exactly the siblings are able to come up with, and in terms of like their plan to take down Logan and Matson, as far as you know, rallying with Sandy and Stewie and the Pierces and all of their previous you know, again, all of their previous people that they've met. I'm interested to see if Kendall's relationship with Naomi, which was kind of put on the back burner in the last season, whether that's going to last, you know, because Naomi was a really awesome character introduced in season 2, and I want her to you know, to have more of an impressive part. What else? I'm interested to see if Greg's pending lawsuit against Greenpeace, if he's still planning on going through with that, because that was just one of the most
Greenpeace.
It's like my grandpa sold my gave away my inheritance to Greenpeace, so I'm going to sue Greenpeace. That is just one of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen in anything, and mostly I'm interested to see if Roman is able to actually pull one over, because the thing about Roman is that he's always like this close to actually pulling off deals. It's unlike Kendall, because Kendall's always the one that everyone's expecting to, but then falls flat on his face. But Roman is the guy who like nobody expects anything from. So when he does pull something off, like, you know, telling Logan that the Azerbaijani merger was complete horseshit and that they had nothing, and also being, you know, making the decision to ultimately axe Walter when they were planning to unionize in season 2, and ultimately being the one to convince Paxton to come into the company. You know, Roman's always been like that subtle, sneaky, silent player. So even though I don't necessarily know if he's going to take back the company, I would be interested to see if he actually does get the CEO position, because he has proven, I think, that of all of his siblings, he is the one that is definitely the most competent. And yeah, like I said, just more Tom and Greg moments, because you can never have enough Tom and Greg moments on this show. You know, that's what I'm looking forward to the most. You know, I'm also interested to see if Kendall does take a seat back from being like one of the main players and becomes more a part of the ensemble. I think that's also necessary as well.
Yeah, I have 2, judging from the trailers, that really stuck out to me. One was Roman having like a SWAT raid in the streets, like his hands out like this, like what is that happening? And but I think my number one scene that I'm looking forward to is the Tom and Shiv fight.
Yes,
I think that's going to be an all-timer. Some Emmys are going to be won there.
Absolutely.
It's going to be like 10 minutes of yelling at each other.
Yes.
And I know the writing's going to be amazing. It's going to be,
yeah, I can't wait.
I can't wait.
Yep. So like I said, so when you listen to this, so guys, when you listen to this episode tomorrow on Spotify, let us know if any of our theories that we posited about this premiere episode tonight or last night as to when this episode drops were true. Be sure to follow Luke with everything he's got going on at Luk Reviews. Luke, thanks once again for coming on. You are the man as always. And with that being said, that is it for double feature month. March Madness is over. We will be back next week for Dungeons and Dragons, as well as like I said, which will be a little bit more of a calm, cool, collective week before we get into the fun that is April. I'm still wondering if I'm going to have a theme name for April. Like I said, be sure to keep coming back for everything that the Talking TV podcast has going on. Follow Luke at Luk Reviews. Follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews at Official Talking TV Podcast. Subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify. All that good stuff. 12 seasons in a short film. And watch more fucking movies. We will see you guys next time.